Smoke weed every day. Smoke weed every day. Smoke weed every day. Close, I get it, homie. Smoke weed every day.
What's up, everybody? This is going to be interesting because I'm going to try and have a neutral stance, but at the same time address the person's concern asking the question from the angle that they asked the question. I'm trying to be as neutral as possible, but please refer back to the way he asked the question. He definitely was asking the question as if he has some intuitive feeling that cannabis is not serving his highest good, and he's asking for some reinforcement on why he should stop doing it. I'm not an expert at psychedelics or cannabis. I do know a lot, and I'm going to present a lot. I do have friends who are daily users of both all psychedelics and cannabis, and a lot of them are very high-functioning individuals. I am going to say things on the side of the fence of the reasons why one should consider not consuming plant medicines. However, I do have a whole bunch of information on why it's positive to consume plant medicines. But the bottom line is we all need to tap into what intuitively feels good for us, and at different times of our life, it might feel differently. So keep that in mind. So for my personal cannabis use, about 10 years ago, I started researching cannabis and all the other psychedelic plant medicines, and that research lasted about 3 years before I deemed it okay for cannabis and many other psychedelic compounds to be ingested by myself. And so I was using cannabis on and off for about 5 years. It's been about 2 years since I've been consuming cannabis. Now it's more of just like a special occasion thing. And I feel exactly like this guy who sent me the message feels, that after I consume cannabis with somebody because they want to get high together and pontificate on some universal concepts, the next day I never feel quite right. So let's talk about the reasons why this may be happening. All right, so we're going to be in for the long haul on this group of stories. I'm going to start with a story. So a lot of people talk about tribes and how tribal society uses plant medicines, every single culture all over the world, yada, yada, yada. Well, that's true in recent history. But if we look back, a lot of these cultures also have calendars that are thousands or hundreds of thousands of years old. And most of those calendars track the stars and the planets and our sun's rotation around the galaxy. And the reason for that is because there are certain ages that this planet goes through and certain levels of consciousness that the people, the humans living on the planet, also evolved through. And so before we were warring, there is a time in our history where the consciousness of humanity wasn't a warring species. Okay, we were more interconnected, more linked together. And at that time, the ones that were leading the culture, the high priests, the priest class, these were the people that were connected to the spirit realm. And they were the decision makers, okay? So if you think about Egypt, there were not the traditional story of Egypt, but actual what we know of as Egypt. What actually happened, there was the pharaohs, and then there was a high priest. And the high priest is actually where all the information came from. The pharaoh was responsible for ruling the people. So the high priest didn't have sex. They were basically half foot into this society, half foot into the spirit society, and determining where the culture goes. Now, what happened was either consciousness changed or things like ice ages happen where everybody has to change and transition and switch their diet. There's theory that this happened when man started eating meat, but eventually wars break out and we become a warring species. Either the land gets we need more land or food or whatever happens, we start warring with each other. And this cycle happens over and over and over again. So I'm not saying it only happened once. But we go from a non-warring species to a warring species. Now, in a warring species, in warring humanity, now the top leaders are the ones that kill the most people. They are the ones who are the generals. They're the war heroes. These are the people that rise to the top when society is fixated around defense, when we're defending and attacking. The people at the top are the people that are the best killers. So when this happens in humanity and when in human history, we lose touch with the connection to the spirit realm. We lose touch to that natural connection because the leaders, the old leaders that would teach the people how to do the things to remain connected, these spiritual leaders are cast aside. The warriors are the one who lead control. And guess what? The warriors don't have the natural ability. Their kundalini isn't awoke. They don't have the portal. They don't have the access, however you want to say it. And now what has to happen? Dun, 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 we use help, right? We use the plants. And the plants have the connection to source. And that is why all cultures all over the world use some sort of psychedelic to get these visions and get the ceremonies and yada, yada, yada. So just wanted to state that in history there was a time when psychedelic compounds were not so prevalent. Like I said, I love plants, and I think merging consciousness with them can be a good thing, especially things like fungus. However, I just want to offer a different perspective because there's a lot of people talking about the glorious parts of it all. All right, so everyone's talking about this endocannabinoid system. Hippopotamus. Okay. Am I losing my memory? No, because I didn't smoke weed last night. All right, the endocannabinoid system. It stands for endogenous, which means that the body produces its own cannabinoids. So the promoters of cannabis always talk about the body has its own receptor sites. Yes, it does, because our body produces cannabinoids. So just simply because our body has an endogenous cannabinoid system, receptor system, doesn't mean we be loading the body with cannabis, okay? Meaning from outside the body. There's compounds that the body produces naturally, internally, that is it's not really cannabis, but they are cannabinoids, okay? And there's cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. And we can merge and we can use that as a medicine. So let's talk about that. That medicine goes into our body, and the body uses it a little bit differently than the body, and it breaks it down a little bit differently than the body naturally produces it. The question here is, do we want to be overloading the system with things that we already produce naturally? This, from my athletic standpoint, reminds me a lot like steroid compounds, which that word steroid doesn't even really make any sense. It's just these compounds that are performance enhancing that our body naturally gives, and if we give more, then the body's going to be able to perform better. It's going to be stronger, it's going to be faster, it's going to be quicker. They work. However, it reduces the body's ability to produce the hormones regularly, and it kind of screws things up long term. Not saying that's the case with cannabis. However, it's something to be aware about. There's the most common cannabinoid that is studied is anandamide. And this thing is responsible for elevated mood, reduction of fear. It actually reduces memories of fear, expansiveness, intuitiveness. It actually increases lateral thinking, which means that you actually get ideas that you probably normally wouldn't think about. And these things can be good, and it can be stimulated naturally in the body through activities like exercise, or if you get into another flow state through a creative process. All of this can serve a purpose, right? You guys get what I'm going with this? If you're a professional athlete, taking performance-enhancing drugs might be worth it if you're getting paid $10 million a year, okay? If you're at home playing videos every single day and you're not even getting paid for that, maybe supplementing yourself in these highly intuitive, stimulating substances isn't that necessary, okay? It just might not be, but if you every once in a while need to create some masterpiece on a canvas, then yeah, smoking some pot or taking an edible or whatever, it can serve a purpose. But this is medicine, everybody. Cannabis is legal because it is a medicine. And it's legal because it's stupid to make a plant illegal. That's a whole nother subject. But it's very dumb that people go to jail over having a plant in their car. But realize that it's a medicine. It's not necessarily food like we eat. It's medicinal. All right, I have 3 more things to talk about. I want to talk about pinoline, dreams, and memory. Pinoline. Pinoline is actually something that I've tried researching the last few years every once in a while, and I can never find anything on it. And the only thing I found on it is this is a substance that the pineal gland produces. If you go and do some dark therapy, there's healing and therapy and retreat centers where you do dark therapy, which means you just sit in a dark room. And there's some weird occult practices having to do with this and coordinating that with viewing the sunrise. But there's some crazy stuff messing around with the pineal gland that we can do to achieve some mystical powers. And cannabis stimulates the pineal gland to produce pinoline. And pinoline is something that the pineal gland produces when you're in these dark therapy sessions, produces after it's maxed out its production of melatonin. So pinoline is like the level up of melatonin. And then after that is DMT. In these dark occult practices, dark room, not that occult practices are all dark, even though they might be. You go from producing melatonin, which is a very regenerative, restoring hormone, to pinoline, which is a very connecting to everything substance, to DMT, which is like you are God, I assume. I don't know. I've actually never done DMT, and I've never died. So I haven't experienced it in that level. But pinoline is like an extreme thing that the pineal gland produces, which is why when you're smoking weed and using cannabis, you are like a genius, right? Like, I'm a genius. We're superhumans when we're on cannabis. And the daily users that I know are like running companies. They're some of the smartest people I know. So it goes again with this, like, should we be draining and using our pineal gland to get to these ecstatic states when that stuff is in there for a reason, right? We might need that supercharge for something else, right? And maybe some of that is for dreaming, which I know a lot of people, when they smoke a lot of cannabis, myself including, dreaming just stops. My theory, if I may postulate, is that we are draining our pineal gland's capabilities while using exogenous cannabinoids to do so. And that gives us dreamlike functioning in our conscious waking state, which is awesome. However, when we go to sleep and we need to dream, it's not really there. The motor's running low. And this, dreams are not just some weird thing that we do at night. They are our connection to other realities. So you imagine you are connected to all these other realities through however you want to think about it, and one day you just stop showing up, and your friends or your soul families or whatever, they're just like sitting there like, hey, where's homeboy at? He's usually here every whatever. They don't think about time the way that we think about, and you're just not connected. You're not getting those downloads at night when you're supposed to. Maybe you're getting them during the day, which I also think is true and possible. But I'm more about what is authentic, what is natural. We're here to have this human experience, and if we're spending our entire life being connected to these other realms, do we want to do that? I don't know. It's up to you. I'm just. This is a neutral stance, right? And that takes me to memory. So, from what I gather, talking to people, and even from my own personal experience, while under the influence of cannabis, my memory is out of this world. It's beyond memory. It's almost like I am reliving the circumstance. And same thing with watching movies. Oh, I didn't even talk about the enhanced... I have to talk about this. I have to keep on going about the enhanced vision and the sound and why that is. Okay, so I got one more thing to talk about. So memories, it's almost like I'm back to the actual scenario, right? Like I'm actually connected to that reality, which is a whole other thing about how time doesn't exist linearly and we're actually living in multiple realities. So when I'm remembering something, I'm becoming one with that reality. I'm becoming a member of that reality. And then when I'm not consuming cannabis, it's almost like I lose that ability it's harder to attain that ability. And it's the same thing with the dreaming and the superpowers. Like, cannabis is awesome. It gives us superpowers. That plant fuels our body. It is like jet fuel for the human body. Without it, though, we might become dependent on it, and it might start affecting us, and we might actually have a reduction in life quality when we stop using cannabis if we're using it regularly. All right, one last thing, and this is the coolest thing. Increased taste, right? So you get hungry, increased visual, increased auditory, increased feeling. You actually can feel the body like crazy. Every single cell in the body. You can put your consciousness into this, like inside the spinal cord, and feel it, almost be there. And what else is better? Smell is better. All of these things are better. So I'm gonna sidestep and talk about either people that are hypnotherapists, like Dolores Cannon, and I know some people that studied under her, and they take people into these other dimensions or near-death experiences, which I've had personal conversations with a few people that have had these experiences, and I've also read and studied near-death experiences. When we're talking about the realm that happens after death, okay, or before birth, the thing is that all these people say is that world is so much better than this world. Like, this world is a poor representation of all of the colors, the sights. It's beyond language the way they explain it. It's like everything there is much, much better, multidimensionally better than here. And when you're consuming cannabis and you have the pineal gland lit up and you have these hormones surging through the body, I believe it is a cocktail that connects us to these other realms. And that's why we're downloading the capabilities, the toolkit, okay? It's like the Matrix. We're downloading the toolkit of this other realm. So if you're high or lit or elevated, whatever you want to call it, it's not that you're just hearing the music. When you turn that music on and you puff the doobie or smoke the bowl or pop some edibles, you don't just hear the music. You actually are connected to, like, okay, I hear the drumming, and you actually like feel what the drummer feels to produce those sounds. You actually feel how the band was composing the music. It's crazy stuff, right? When you're high, and these seem to be the capabilities that are explained when people are talking about the afterlife or what happens in between lives. It's the same sort of language where it's stuff that we can't even really put into words on this dimension, but we get access to that through something like cannabis. And all of these plants are different, right? The fungus, they all have their own capabilities. Like, fungus connects you, right? And that's why when you're on mushrooms, you're like hugging trees. That's where that term comes from. And then ayahuasca, DMT, all of these other plants have their own magic and their own consciousness that you're merging with. But anyways, that's some perspective on cannabis that might not be out there. And that's my response to the message that was sent to me this morning. I'm just now getting back to that. Adios and hang loose. Was sent to me this morning. Just now getting back to that. Anyways, there's a million different things on this topic, right? I could talk about this from all different angles, and even there's still a lot more to talk about regarding what I have said, including psychological disturbances that we might be using cannabis to avoid or fill in the void for. Is that the same as a void? Maybe it is. Anyways, that is all for this show. Peace.